Welcome to PM Express Business Edition, and the question is the timing right? That is the big question on the minds of some Ghanaians as government plans to place some restrictions on some items. But we also want to look at whether the economy is ready for this action. On PM Express Business Edition, we'll be exploring this with the Chief Executive of the Ghana Association of Industry, Seth Twum Akwabua, who is asked last year, and also Mr. Edward Karowe, General Secretary of the Agric Workers Union, General Agriculture Workers Union. And indeed, it's a great time to have him in studio as we celebrate Farmers' Day tomorrow. We'll also be joined via Zoom, that is an economist, Ebo Texan, Professor Ebo Texan, to explore about the readiness of the economy. So, plans to place restrictions on some items and whether the economy is ready or not. My name is George. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at the import restrictions and whether the economy is ready for this action. The concerns are still in Parliament and whether it will be approved or the minister can lay that LI or not. But moving this discussion forward, we want to engage industry. We also want to engage the farmers. We also want to engage an economist about whether this economy is ready for this action. Professor Ebo Texan is an economist and will be joining us in this discussion. And also from industry's perspective, we are engaging the Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industry, Seth Twum Akwabua, and also from the General Agriculture Workers Union, Mr. Edward Karowe. And he is also into some serious production as a farmer as well. So, Mr. Karowe, it will be a good time to wish you Happy Farmers' Day in advance and for the good work that people like you are doing. Those who do not know, you are into, is it oil plantation as well? And
well, you don't.
I'm letting the cat out of the bag.
You don't talk, you just act.
Yeah.
And then, as the word, the expressions goes, action speaks louder than words. We should stop much of the talking and do action as a country, as a people.
I'll be coming back because this is more of a two-part discussion. I should be focusing also more on tomorrow's Farmers' Day and whether indeed what are we doing to ensure that the food security, this whole idea about restrictions is also about the ability to produce to meet the demand of Ghanaians. And that'll be a good time to bring in Seth Twum Akwabua. And this whole debate has been back and forth. Was industry consulted on this?
Yes, we were. Thank you, George. We were consulted. At the very beginning, we were asked to bring a possible list of products that we think we have adequate and reasonable local capacity or the potential capacity to produce. And this dates way back, actually. Remember last year when we had the Russian-Ukraine crisis, His Excellency the President met us at the Jubilee House and actually admonished industry to check up our production volumes. Also, if you remember, during the COVID period, where it got to a point where countries were closing their borders, and we were very much, worried that as a country we may not be able to get some of our essential products in because we are virtually so dependent on imports. And even for those that we produce locally, we import a lot of the raw materials. So if you had a situation where there's crisis globally and countries are shutting their doors, then you ask yourself, the very essential commodities that you consume in this country, if you are dependent on imports and a situation like that happens, what happens to your people? So it was really a wake-up call, and we thought that industry and businesses needed to come up strongly on this. And not long after, then we had the Russian-Ukraine war. A similar threat was staring in our face. So indeed, when we met His Excellency the President, we discussed this. And we said, well, industry is prepared to step up into the plate and work hard to produce for us. But then certain conditions must also be good for us. The environment must be good. We should be competitive in the market. There's a lot of unfair trade practices going on, and it's really killing local industry. So we needed to address some of these. So I think it's after all these that the ministry decided that they will come up with a measure of this nature. So there's been some discussions going on. In fact, a committee was set up. Initially, they were targeting about 3 products, the rice, the oils, and the fruit juices. They thought that we could start with this. And then later on, they expanded the list. So if you look at it, in Ghana, we import more than 6,000 products into the country, different products. But the target here is just about 22. It means that some work has gone into trying to analyze which products could be suitable for this arrangement. So we were consulted, and of course, we didn't see the final list until it was published, because I think the list was probably longer than this. So we still have, not issues, but we can still make further inputs into the list, deduct or subtract or add. So we were consulted, and I think that...
I will come back to you on the ability to produce, because that has been the big question. But let me bring in the farmers. Let me bring in the agri workers. For you as producers of the raw goods or commodities or the plantations, if I can use that expression, for you, is it the way to go? Because for you as well, you complain when you produce enough and you're not getting buyers. And subsidized raw materials and goods from outside are coming onto the market. I mean, I see people even importing eggs and even mineral water and all the rest.
Well, when you take an economy, it runs in two ways, imports and exports. You import what you cannot produce, or you import as raw materials to facilitate domestic production, or you import just because you want to conserve what you already have. For instance, there are some countries that have enough oil reserves, and yet they are not exploring it, but decide to import oil to use and protecting that for the future. So reasons are there for imports. You can import to produce, to support domestic production, or you can import to meet emergency situations. Now, when you take Ghana's situation, why do we import? Look, we have just allowed imports to be the order of the day as an easier, policy direction to stimulate development. When in the actual fact, you cannot use imports alone to stimulate development. It must be backed by production. So no one would disagree with government in principle that we should put in place measures to reduce imports. But when you are putting in place measures on the back of government-owned policies which have undermined production, immediately after a policy that has undermined production, domestic production, then you create a very difficult situation in the economy. For instance, the discounted benchmark value policy, which was implemented by government since 2019. And the last time, the time that government actually put it off was in 2023 budget. Now, for all these years, it has undermined domestic production. So a year after you have used a policy to undermine domestic production, weaken capacity of domestic industries to produce, you quickly then come back and say, look, I am going to do what? Restrict imports. When you do that, the likelihood of prices going up is very high because you have not actually nurtured, supported the domestic producers to increase their capacity to be able to meet the shortfall that the imports will bring. So that could be problematic. And so no one will say that we should not put restrictions.
It's a good thing, but the timing and previous policies have raised a lot of question marks about. That's what I get from you.
Yes. If I cite an example here, the poultry industry, per our own statistics, over 70% of it is collapsed now. Poultry industry.
Why?
Because over the period, poultry industry producers could not get the raw materials to sustain their production. Cost of maize was beyond their reach. The soya was beyond their reach. Other necessary ingredients that is needed to support the production was beyond their reach. They made a lot of cry, government did not. Government still promoted the importation of poultry products into the country. We are all aware about the LaBianca case, where it was about exemptions for importation of poultry products into this country. Now, suddenly, after you have collapsed about 70% of it, you wake up and see that we are going to restrict the importation of poultry.
So there's a question about timing and the positioning of government, but some will say that one step at a time. But I'll come back to you. I mean, I asked a question about the ability to produce. Recently, we engaged an MD of a hotel, and he was complaining about when they even put in a request for meat and all the rest. They don't get it, poultry, locally, and they have to import. There's a big question about the ability to produce to meet local demand. And let's be realistic here.
Yes, George, you're right. The capacity issue has come up all the time. Anytime there's
so why did AGI then endorse this whole program? Because the fear is that you end up resulting in prices going up. You end up resulting in some food security issues because the economy might not be ready for this.
Okay, so I think people don't understand the whole concept.
It's restriction.
It's not
banning.
If it's banning, then you say, do we have adequate local capacity?
Aren't you just playing on words here?
No, we are not playing on words.
Yeah.
We are talking of completely different things.
Yeah.
If it's banning, then it means that you cannot bring the product at all.
Oh.
And therefore, if you don't have enough local capacity and local volumes, then the demand exceeds the supply, then you're going to have a problem. Okay? But this is not the situation. They say restriction. What does it mean? And that's why they've set up a committee. The idea is that we want to know those who will be importing. But before you import...
But hasn't government got that data already?
They have the data. So yes, but they have the data, but I believe that there are several grey importers that you probably cannot really track immediately, but government has data. And you also need data on local production. So between the local production and the total national consumption of a particular product, then you ascertain the gap. The fact is that, are you really importing just to fill the gap? If you are importing in excess of the gap, you are using foreign currency to do so. So first, you want to manage your foreign balance of payment situations. Now, when it comes to the local capacity, there are some of the products we have excess local capacity.
Help me, educate you from coming from industry. You just educate me.
Yeah, some of the products, I will tell you.
Yeah.
If you take cement, for example, and cement was in the original list.
Yeah.
Cement, we have about 6 or 7 cement factories in Ghana. These are big companies. They are producing large volumes.
More than what the local market
needs.
Okay.
So
that is just one off. Okay.
I'll give you another example.
No, sorry for the rude interruption. Go ahead. No, sorry. Go ahead. No, sorry.
Like diapers.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised. One company, they must necessarily export to stay in business.
Interesting.
Yes.
In Ghana here?
In Ghana here. People don't know. And it's located right in Accra here.
Wow.
If they don't export about 40 to 50%, they can't stay in.
Why are they not getting the local market consumption?
So
is it because it's too expensive, some will say? Because of cost of production?
They are fear. In fact, they are worried. And they keep complaining about this. That there are some importers that are bringing in substandard products, not labeled, not expiry. There are so many problems within the trading arrangement. So such products, when they come in very cheap. They undermine the market. They come in at a very cheap price. And naturally, consumers, especially in our economic situation, people go for the cheaper price. And therefore, they can't just meet the local, they can't compete in the local market. Other conditions exist. If you're a local producer, you all know the challenges we have. Our cost of production is quite high. Our electricity cost, in Ghana, we pay 10, 12, or sometimes 15 cents per kilowatt hour. In China, they are paying 5 cents per kilowatt hour. If you are borrowing in Ghana, you know the interest cost. So the cost of production generally is high. A lot of the products we also manufacture in the country, we import the raw materials. So already you are importing at a cost. And then you add your production cost. So you only make marginal gains, not significant. But the one who is importing is very easy to import and sell. Within 3 months, you have sold your goods, you've turned around, you've made your money, you go again. But production is tough. Okay, so for all these reasons, it makes local production a bit uncompetitive. That's why most manufacturers struggle. But then, having said that, on this particular policy or law, the idea here is not to ban. The idea is to ascertain the gap and then gradually grow the local production volumes. As you are increasing the local production volumes, then you reduce the importation. So if they know that these are the people importing, because you are applying, you are going through a process, they have records of the individual importers and the volumes you are applying for. So for example, if in a particular product, you were importing, say the local demand is 100,000 tons, okay? And you were importing 70,000 tons. Local production is 30,000 tons. You work on, so they will not stop you from importing the 70,000 tons because that's what the local market requires. Otherwise, you create shortages. When you create shortages, prices will go up, and all the challenges you talked about will come in. But they will say, allow you import the 70,000 when you put your aggregate imports together. However, as we increase the local production, you say 40 or 50, then those applying, if you are importing 10, you say, can you reduce it to 8? And this so that you reduce
so gradually.
It's a gradual approach.
But Mr. Kobo, I still come back to my question about the ability of your members to produce to meet them, and that is the fear of a lot of people.
So that's the point. The question. Can
you guys do it? If today we gradually use these restrictions,
you see, business people are smart people.
Can you?
You don't produce just for the sake of it. You produce to fill market arrangement. If market conditions are good and market is there, that vacuum that is created, they will fill it. Even the very importers of these products, when they realize that now it makes more sense to produce locally, they will partner their own colleagues that they are importing from and say, let's set up the factory here, because when you set it up here, you can actually produce and satisfy the market. So capacity doesn't exist in vacuum. You grow it. And if you use a program like this, a policy like this, a law like this, to really support local production through market arrangement, you see how they will jack up. How much time do you require to increase poultry, for example? A couple of weeks. Within 2 months, you can start a poultry farm and you are making business. And installed capacity is good. He just mentioned that during the COVID period and recent policies and all that, about 70% of the poultry companies collapsed. They have the knowledge. They even have their setups. Once you give them the opportunity, it's a question of reorganizing themselves, bringing the old chicks, and then starting production. So the capacity can easily be developed. What I think has to be done, and we also agree that a policy of this is not an end in itself. You need to grow the value chains, because if you don't do that, if you don't really arrange things properly, even if you are given the opportunity, you still cannot supply them.
How much time do you need to do that? If for and that you need about a year, 2 years. If this thing is introduced gradually, that will get to that point when people will not even be importing X to consuming.
For some of the products, it can be very fast. It could be a couple of months. Others may take a bit of time because of the nature of the product, because they are long-term in nature. But I mentioned poultry. I think it wouldn't take that long. But poultry, the key part of it is the feed. If you're able to do agriculture very well, you're able to link agri to industry, do the value chains very well, and if you are growing maize and it takes a couple of months, and you are using it to feed your poultry, it doesn't have to take more than 6 months to resuscitate such an industry.
Capacity value chain. Let me bring in the from Mr. Karewe, Jared Gotcha, and he's also a farmer as well. For you, is that support being given to you guys?
Yeah.
So that you are building your capacity? Because I'm also worried about the food security concern here.
Yeah.
Even without these restrictions, we're having our own challenges. From the perspective of a farmer, is the environment good for you to produce enough to deal with these capacity concerns that people have been raising?
You see, my view is that this policy, per se, is not bad. But the policy is implemented, and you can describe it like putting the cart before the horse. Okay. If you look at some of the items that are there, it is proper for government to restrict their importation. Noodles and pastas.
Your members are producing it, right?
No.
The local industries that are producing are important. There are some are producing locally, right? If I get that correct, right, some of your members are producing.
Yeah, there's some are producing.
Yeah.
Yes. Things of that nature, you can easily mineral water.
Mineral water. I mean, yeah.
You see,
importing
no, I'm just making a point. Then he talked about diapers, which he has shown that some companies need to
even
export to
export.
survive. Now, if you are sugar, again, how much sugar do we produce in this country?
Okay.
You see, I'm not necessarily supporting the fact that we should import more sugar into this country, but do you produce sugar in this country at all? I'm
not interrupting him, but I think it's very important. In the case of sugar, for example, we are not producing sugar.
Okay.
But if you have a policy like this, it will not stop the importation. When they say restriction, it does not mean that overnight you stop the sugar from coming in. You let the sugar come in 100%.
Okay.
As we grow, then you reduce it.
Okay. Mr.
My
Kare.
point is that putting the cart before the horse.
That's-
I have never said that you should not restrict. We try to build our own sugar factory here. We've spent millions of dollars to put it up. What is the state of it? What is the state of it?
Yeah.
So you get up today, you want me to support a policy whereby you refuse to let a factory run, which we have already spent money to build, and then you are saying that you are restricting sugar. Now, you come to, if you talk about poultry products, you have collapsed the poultry industry. What is the alternative support you are to give producers in this country?
Yeah.
You have ruled out this policy to restrict import. They should also come alongside a policy alternative to support domestic producers. For instance, you just mentioned electricity. Is there any plan that when it comes to domestic producers, electricity bills will come down, or they will not increase electricity for them in the coming
Or
years?
specialized rates for industries.
Industries and so on.
Yeah.
Is there any alternative policy about that? Now you look at taxes. Have you also come out with a set of taxes to the domestic producers that will be exempted from this type of taxes? You see, do you have anything like that? Now, when it comes to agricultural production, tell us what is the state of irrigation agriculture in this country.
What is the state? You are in that space. Tell me.
I'm telling you that it remains the same. It remains the same in the sense that there's no significant change in it. One, we have not, how much irrigation have we added to the existing one?
Yeah.
We tried under the One Village, One Dam. It has not worked.
So it's more.
I'm just making the point here because, you see, when you make restrictions, you're a consumer, I'm also a consumer. Regardless of the fact that I produce, I may not be able to produce everything. And no one, a single producer, can produce all that you need. You see, now, you have come with the Polgo multi-purpose irrigation dam. What is the state of it? What signal are you giving to agriculture? And we all know that climate change is here with us. It is severe in this country now, and it is not going to abate. You see that? What are you doing to ensure that we have enough water to replace the precarious rain pattern and so on? What is the state of fighting galamsey, which destroys agricultural infrastructure permanently and irreversibly?
So I get from you a lot of policy inconsistency. Once government is trying to do something like this, there are a lot of inconsistencies in terms of other policy programs that should have rather supported this.
So that is why I started by saying that the policy to restrict imports per se is not bad. Timing is important, and what do you put in place? If you are saying that you want to protect local industries, you are assuming that they've got all that they need to produce. The only thing that is left or is disturbing
But some would say one step at a time. Let me try.
But I try to say that.
Yeah.
One step at a time. But then it is putting the cart before the horse.
Hold on. Let me try and bring in Professor Ebu Texin. He is an economist and a senior lecturer at the Econs Department. And Prof, one question I want to put to you, Prof, is for you, is this economy ready as a development economist for this action that government is trying to introduce? Prof, if you can unmute, I'll be so grateful. We are struggling to hear you, Prof.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Prof. So my question was whether this economy...
Thank you. Good evening. to your viewers, and it's a pleasure to be on this program.
Okay, thank you.
George, all my comments have been said by the gentleman that was just speaking. He was so spot on my thoughts. At times, I wonder why we come up with certain policies. It looks like Ghana doesn't learn from its history. When Nkrumah started import substitution industrialization, he started by doing import restrictions. If you read Ghana's industrial history and industrial policy, nobody will tell you that if today a country is thinking about import restrictions without supporting its domestic firms to improve their capacity, then that country has lost it. It is totally unnecessary. Absolutely. I'm surprised the CEO of AGI is supporting this policy.
Oh.
I mean, it should not be a policy that should be supported at all. Look, if you want to import, as for import restrictions, it's okay. We need to make sure that we domesticate our consumption. But this thing has to be data-driven. As we speak, Ghana poultry farmers produce only 5% of the demand. No matter what you do to supporting them, is going to take a time for their capacity to improve. So why would you want to restrict when even the imports that come in is not able to meet the demand? And you know, poultry is quite critical to nutritional needs of especially children. Go and talk to the Ghana Medical Association that anytime Ghana has tried to impose restrictions on poultry, they should let you know the health outcomes and the sort of cost that Ghana bears just to keep people's nutrition up. I mean, what are we talking about here? If you take sugar, Ghana doesn't produce sugar. Why would you want to restrict sugar? If you want to improve domestic capacity, put the firms, and the gentleman was spot on. I mean, he spoke my mind. You have to assess their capacity. Speak to them. The poultry farmers say the feed is the problem. If the feed is the problem, it has to be linked to agriculture, because the maize that we use to produce the feed, go and ask the farmers, what is your problem? Why are you not able to provide that for them? And then the government will use policy to support the farmers to get a feed to the poultry, domestic poultry producers. And they begin to show that the cost of their production has reduced to the level where they are now okay to compete. If after that time, you think that the poultry come in relatively cheaper, the gap between what they can sell and what the import is coming in, you close that gap with so many other ways of doing it. You don't need to set up a committee that will decide who gets what to bring in. There are so many ways of doing this. And I'm surprised that today, Ghana is hosting the AFTA. Ghana has signed the EPA. Ghana is a signatory to a lot of trade agreements. Ghana will think about restricting things that it doesn't have capacity to produce. As for the stomach of animals, you can totally burn it for health reasons.
That is the EMADIE. But Prof also...
I don't mean, because if you've lived abroad before, you know that is not even allowed to be sold on the shelves. It is not allowed to be sold on the shelves in the UK, United States. So it's unhealthy. So we can totally ban it for health reasons, which the WTO allows.
But Prof, what about the concern? What about the concern about, and there are some who have expressed concern and the fear that if this is not targeted or well targeted, the implication on inflation as well, even though this is a gradual thing.
I'm coming to that.
So what are your thoughts, whether these fears are grounded or not, the impact on inflation and spike in prices of goods on the market?
I'm coming to that. So I was using an example of poultry. So suppose you restrict. Meanwhile, our domestic firms cannot even produce 5%. You need to get their capacity. They say, okay, we can produce 40% of the market. And then you see how you bring in the 60%. Then you know that it's not going to have an impact on prices. When you restrict and their capacity is not able to meet the demand, you shoot up prices. So while the central bank is scratching its head in trying to bring down inflation, we are coming up with counter policies to cause inflation. I mean, what sort of economy are we running? Where's the coercion? Where's the coercion in policies? This is not a way to improve domestic capacity. The way to improve domestic capacity is to make the business environment conducive, is to let the cost of doing business drop to levels that are conducive for firms to be competitive. It is about supporting research and development for innovation in your domestic economy. Once you put all of these things in place, your firms will be competitive. If you pick any sector and they are still not competitive, then you begin to talk. But you don't put the cart before the horse. You don't restrict before you build the capacity. You are going to cause inflation.
But Prof, some would argue that it's one
This
step.
is not backed by data, and it is not. It is. I mean, I'm even surprised. It's not backed by any data. I mean, the Minister of Finance just told us that our domestic poultry farmers produce less than 5% of the market. So where is this thing coming from?
But Prof, don't you think that is one step at a time? That this is restrictions. It's not banned, Prof.
No, it is not a ban. So you don't restrict. You improve the domestic capacity, and then you restrict. You don't restrict before you improve the domestic capacity.
Prof,
when you do that, the firms will hide behind the inefficiencies and still be inefficient.
Prof, I'll come back to you. You're a development economist. The fear about us being WTO members after, and the implications of this. Mr. Chumako, but the concern is that let's build the capacity of industries. Let's give them all the support. And that is the way to go. This gradual restriction is not going to help any of us. Yes.
Prof said, in principle, he's not against the idea of trying to restrict if you can have the local capacity. And my colleague here said the same thing. And they're also saying, let's build local capacity first. And I'm saying the same thing, that we need to develop the value chains. However, the little difference, though, is that for private sector, if you're saying that, when you say you are building local capacity, what does it mean? The local capacity is incentivize them. So put in measures to incentivize them. But at the end of the day, it is the private sector that is supposed to be doing this. Private sector investment will not go into areas where the businesses are not commercially viable. The current conditions you have, where if it is poultry, there's so much cheap imports coming in. If you do your project analysis, you realize that you are not commercially viable. So you won't even invest in the first place. Okay? So I agree that both local capacity, and I even added the value chains. If it is maize you are growing to feed it, do so. So the planting for food and jobs should look at it. So agriculture side, we sort it out. And then in addition, the value chains working, the supply chain arrangement to reduce cost of the feed to the poultry farmer. Then poultry farmer can also increase its volumes. Then you can become very competitive. But in doing so, there must be some level of assurance that if I produce at this level and I'm reasonably competitive, imports will not come in the volumes that they are coming in to kill my business. So a combination of it has to be looked at. I don't think that the idea here is that, and I was giving sugar as an example, I think to be very insane and unreasonable when we don't have sugar production plant and say, I'm restricting import. Then what are you going to
But they have put it there.
Listen, so I am not the minister, but I believe, but you see, I think you should get the principle. I'm understanding it from a different angle. They could be said that for the committee that is going to look at this, for the first year or so, there's no sugar restriction, even though it says restriction, you are looking at the volumes that is coming in. So they could say, whoever applies, get him the license to operate. However, we are encouraging people to set up. As they set up, we can then reduce the imports. So I don't think the idea is that when there's a restriction, we are going to make it so difficult for people to bring in and then reduce the volume to the extent that it makes prices go up because people are not having access to the goods. I think that is probably the understanding.
Someone have that a lot of policy measures by this government have rather worked against local industries. And I stand to educate in this of the data, but from the perception point of view, have not supported industries over the years to build the capacity to this extent that, listen, when we even do a gradual restrictions on some products, now you've been given the face. The cost of credit is another thing. Production capacity in terms of tariffs is another thing. Allowing, foreign firms to come in, and there's an instance even about an oil Chinese firm coming in, set up factory in Teman, in certain times where they were. So all these policy measures, if today government had that plan of doing these gradual restrictions, before this action, a lot of things should have been implemented to support, incentivize industry. Some are saying that you're already on your one leg, and the whole idea about restrictions is exciting, but they have not supported you over the years to live up to expectation.
I appreciate that. And we are the ones who are always complaining.
Yeah.
So why would I be here and deny these facts?
Yeah.
These are facts. And me and you have sat down on this.
Yeah.
We always complain about cost of credit. We always complain about cost of raw materials that we're importing, cost of energy. All these challenges are there. And even in this meeting, in this program, I've talked about it. So I appreciate it. These challenges are there. But you see, in solving the problem, we need to resolve some of these challenges. But at the same time, you also have to look at it from another angle. That if you have such a huge volume of imports coming in without any kind of arrangement, okay, then you will never be able to also solve this other
Aren't
problem.
these imports rather more of like a substitute or helping where you are not able to meet production? Maybe it's more of helping in the, because for instance, if you are producing about half of the capacity needs of, for instance, rice, for instance, these imports are substituting or more of supporting or balancing something.
No. I'll give you a number
You
of
cited the diaper example.
I can
What
give you
about
another
other
example.
products about?
If you take example, a product like cables.
Yeah.
You have 3 manufacturing plants here who all have ISO certified. Well, they are all ISO certified companies. Their products are so good, and indeed, Ghana Standards Authority even conducted a test. And clearly, the products we were producing in this country, that's regarding the cables, were much better quality than the imported ones. Today, most of them are down because of the huge imports that are coming in. Because of the huge imports.
It
some of them are
tariffs?
Some of them are substandard.
Yeah.
Some of them has been so. And you see, the cable manufacturers will tell you, they know the price of copper at the international market. They know the price of all the raw materials at the international market. Yes, some of the goods could come in and sold at a price which is ridiculously low, below even the cost price. So in such a situation, how would you expect the local
Their
companies
governments
to grow?
are subsidizing them, but you are not getting the same support.
That is the other thing. Some of the governments are providing what they call export rebates. So when you are exporting, they take all the taxes. So they are dumping goods here. And to prove dumping is not an easy thing. Of course, you can go to GITC, Ghana International Trade Commission, to work on it. It will take several months, several years for you to be able to establish this. So there are challenges in the system with the importation. So I think that if you only look at it from one angle, you make a mistake. That's why I appreciate the concern that is being expressed that let's build local capacity. Let's incentivize local producers. Let's create an environment that makes their product competitive. Let's do all that. But in addition to that, you should also look at the
But
inputs.
that should come first before this one.
It can be done simultaneously once you use the gradualist approach.
Are you worried about the repercussions of this action, whichever way you want to look at it? I know some of your members also do export. Now, if, for instance, tomorrow your members or one member of you was export maybe to South Africa or something, and then they also try to introduce this kind of restriction on goods coming in from Ghana, that might not be good for your members as well.
Well, I think it all depends on how it's implemented.
Yeah.
The implementation is actually the issue. That's why everybody says, in principle, getting a measure of this nature is not too bad.
Yeah.
However, the implementation. And I think the implementers, the committee, and the government and the ministries will have to look into it and make sure that they implement it very well. If you do it in a way that does not infringe on WTO regulations and bring in any countervailing measures from other countries, then import restrictions are actually accepted under the WTO regulations.
Okay.
If you care to know, maybe later when you talk to Prof,
yeah.
he will talk about it.
Yeah.
But there are conditions, there are requirements you have to go through. But if you want to protect your local industry, this is done. Okay. So if the implementation is well done and it's done transparently on the basis of ability to produce and then fill the gap, I think that should be fine. That should be accepted.
Doc, I mean, you are into production. Who is buying your stuff? As farmers.
If you take, let me put it broadly.
Yeah.
Government policies are not supporting domestic producers. And I have a catalog of them. I'm just coming from the field. I drove in.
Yeah.
I'm just coming from the field.
Yeah.
It does not support domestic producers.
You're on your
And
own.
I'm speaking this categorically. They can prove me wrong. Look, if you look at the area of vegetable oils, There's so much imported vegetable oils in this country.
Are you producing
We have
enough?
got the
Are you producing enough?
companies have got the capacity to produce that. But then government will not support them. You see, there are some things I believe I can speak about them because they are national issues. For instance, if you take rubber production in this country, we have a processing capacity of about 140,000 tons. Processing capacity, they can process the raw rubber here. National production capacity is only 100,000. So it means there's a shortfall of 40,000. Now, in a situation like this, what is the prudent economic development policy to make? In my view, two options. One, or you can combine the two. One, to facilitate domestic production, increase domestic production to the 140,000 by supporting domestic production. Or you support these companies to import raw rubber, cheap from outside, and process it and send it out. We produce cocoa here. They import our raw beans, process it, send it back here at a very high cost to us. They make the money. So you can do that to those companies, either of them or both. What government has rather done is that liberalize the exportation of raw rubber. So in actual fact, the 100,000 metric tons capacity, that we have produced, what is available for processing is even less than that because part of it is exported. How do you implement? Then you wake up one day and then you are saying that you are going to restrict imports when over the period your policies have undermined domestic producers. I'm saying, when did the poultry industry collapse? Why did it collapse? Didn't we know their reasons? It's not only the feed. That is my area, yeah. And I can't share or agree that it's just an easy thing to go into poultry production and then you can use a short period to do that. It's not only about feed. Look, once it is collapsed, you discourage people from even coming back into it. You won't get new entrants, and the old ones who have already lost all their capital, are you going to give them capital to go in? We are behaving as if they are waiting because we have restricted imports. How does that necessarily put money in the hands of those who have lost their businesses because of the policies we have had in the past? How does that, by restricting this, necessarily reduce the taxes that you have not taken them away? And we are saying simultaneously, there's nothing like simultaneously. Yeah. Because we expect government to have come. That look, whilst we are restricting imports, this is another policy to support it. Farmers. Have they come with that? So
what have they promised industries in terms of what they are trying to do this? Because it appears that it should not be just one thing, but a whole potpourri of measures to support industries.
I fully agree, and that has been our position as well, that this policy is not an end in itself. If you restrict import and we don't support the local capacity development, you will not achieve that objective you want to achieve because you only end up increasing prices. People will end up increasing price because you didn't have the volumes you need. So whilst trying to work on these imports, my understanding of it is that, first of all, you're saying you are restricting imports, but when you are restricting, it's about the gap between what you are producing now and what the local demand is. So once you've ascertained that, then what measures would you do to increase the local production? And there are so many things that we have tabled, and we want to see those things happening. In our engagement with government, this is where we'll be hammering on, that this is just one out of so many things that has to be done. But the fact that you are doing this does not mean those things should be left undone. Otherwise, you will not achieve the objective. So we very much appreciate these concerns. And we are industry players, and we really want this support to be able to achieve this. But I can imagine that as a government, you come with a policy that says, I'm restricting imports, and you are not doing anything to support local production. Then why did you restrict in the first place? So this is where I think that we should hammer, okay? And then make sure that the implementation is done in a way that does not undermine the very objective for which you are doing this.
Mr. Twumasi, someone was saying that certain things should have happened even before this thing was even talked about. And that is where the challenge is, that if you don't start doing those things, there are trust issues about what has happened in the past. Why the people are worried about this whole program?
Well, that is why in our engagement, for us, we think that this is work in progress and we must even engage more. For example, we were very instrumental in pushing for the setting up of the Development Bank Ghana, because we thought that businesses needed medium to long-term funding. The question is, are they able to do that to our satisfaction?
Is that it didn't happen in the first place?
Exactly. So it's happened, but the volumes that are going on is not sufficient. So in the budget, for example, would have loved to see more funds being put there. So those are the things that we have to constantly engage government on. That you want us to jack up local production, yet access to finance is a big challenge. Access to medium to long-term capital is a big challenge. Cost is so high. How can you enable us to do this? Okay, if you are talking about cost of electricity, today we've done a lot of negotiations with PURC. So if you notice, for the past few adjustments that have been done, industry rates are not increased as residential, because industry was even subsidizing residential through the cross-subsidy arrangement. We say we don't want that to happen again, and gradually they are trying to take it off. So we want to see some of those policies that would reduce the cost of production. So I think that those engagement, we must still have it.
And you're pushing very hard on that.
Pushing very hard on that. It's very critical. But without it, you can't achieve the objective you want.
As an economist as well, you see a lot of policy inconsistencies here that again raise a lot of questions about the success of this, even if it's done through a different approach, Prof.
Prof. Edward is so spot on that I find it very difficult to say anything else, because he said it all. I mean, I'll just repeat what Edward is saying. You know,
but as an economist, getting your thoughts as a development economist.
He's speaking economics.
Yeah.
He's speaking economics.
Okay.
He's speaking the things that we need to do. And I don't need to say anything. I mean, he's taking a wind out of my sail. No, George, if people are suffering from malaria because there are too much mosquitoes, right? You don't say, I'm going to spray your area so that you get well. And then after spraying, you go and sit down. You don't tackle the root cause of why the mosquitoes are there. You cannot say you are doing import restriction before you go and find out how you solve the problems of your domestic firms. When the East Asian Tigers did this so well, that is not the route they went. The East Asian Tigers made sure that they supported their domestic firms with cheap capital. They supported them with research and innovation. They made sure that they gave them targets to reduce their cost of production because they were not paying taxes. It was after these things were done that restrictions were imposed on imports. And every year that they enjoyed the restrictions, they were challenged to reduce their cost of production by a little bit. When they had gotten to a level that they were efficient, the government removed the restrictions. And the East Asian Tigers were able to outcompete the imports that come in, and then change the imports to their countries where they come from, to go and even compete with them in their own countries. Now, that is how you go by import restrictions. You make sure that the grounds are prepared for your domestic firms to be able to take advantage of the restrictions. You don't put the restrictions there before you go and see how they take advantage of it. They are complaining about taxes. They are complaining about the cost of electricity. They are complaining about the business environment being too high cost environment. What has government policy done to these three? So if today we are told that, look, we've reduced the taxes for you, we are giving you these supports and all of that, we want you to increase your capacity by 20%. And when you do that, we are going to restrict the imports by so much. Then you challenge the domestic firms to meet that key performance indicator that you have given them, and then begin to inch it up till they become self-sustaining and they can compete themselves. How long would government take to discuss with the domestic firms after the import restriction on how to work on their capacity? So the poultry farmers, yes, you've restricted imports. Now there's a shortage of 90% on the market. You are now going to see how you are going to get the feed to drop to the low levels for them. And then you are going to find out after the feed cost has dropped, how much they can produce and how much they can sell. Is that the way to go? In the meantime, the average Ghanaian consumer is being restricted for the goods that cannot be produced in the economy with the supply of those goods. What happens to the price? And then it causes inflation. And when it causes inflation, it comes with increase in interest rate because the Monetary Policy Committee has to tackle the inflation. And the interest rates are increasing. And the business are, we have to move one step at a time. And the way to go is this. Let us sit down with our domestic producers and find out why they are not competitive. And let us tackle those issues. Then afterwards, we'll check their level of competition with the imports that come in. And then that gap that is there, we try to use policy to close the gap and allow them to compete. These days, who talks about import restrictions? If it's not on health grounds, if it's not on very serious labor issues, like he's saying, the WTO will not allow it. So you see, we need to be quite clear. How many jobs are being lost because our domestic poultry this thing has collapsed? How many jobs have been lost? Now, when you restrict poultry, for instance, how many jobs will be lost from those who import the poultry and who work there? Have we done that assessment, for instance? Have we done that? This thing should be data-driven. It shouldn't be by emotions. Oh, we are suffering. We are domestic friends. Government has to restrict and support us. This is not about emotions. Economics is not about emotions. It's about data.
But Prof, for them being able to submit the document to Parliament and all the rest, all these things might have been done before.
What document did they submit? What document did they submit?
There's an ally that is before Parliament for consideration.
The government to restrict. Look, George, to be honest with you, what the CEO of AGI wants is restriction so that they can get good prices for their goods and people come and demand it.
I don't think so. I think
to sell their products. That's what they want.
No, I don't think. Let me hold on, Prof. Hold on. Let me bring it. I don't think that
we have a few days.
I think industries locally are prepared to compete. Prof, they think that industries are just being lazy, and that's what the problem is.
But I don't think that is the discussion here.
Yeah, no.
That's not the discussion.
That is not the discussion here.
Yeah.
Is industries being lazy?
No, I'm just saying that industries don't want to compete. Maybe.
Absolutely no.
Yeah.
And so, as a matter of fact, we face a lot of unfair competition.
Nobody says that industries don't want to compete.
No, you're making okay, fine. Just land on that point before I bring it. Sorry.
Yes, nobody is saying that nobody wants industries to compete. What we are saying is this, that our industries are competitive.
Okay.
Look, I've interviewed a lot of industries who tell me that, look, but for the taxes and the business environment, we can compete with even exports on the export market. We can go and compete there, much more in our own economy. But the taxes and the business environment is frustrating our production. And that is the point I'm saying that, look, why won't we talk about that first before we think about restrictions? I want to leave that there and come and restrict. Because when we restrict and the taxes are still there, our domestic friends will still not be competitive. When you say want them to be competitive, want them to reduce their cost of production and therefore their prices. When you go and put the restrictions there, you give them a cover. Why would I reduce my prices if the imports are not coming and the price of the few that come in, the price have gone up, and I'm now going to compete at a higher price? Well, I don't need to even reduce my cost of production. You get me? Because when you restrict the imports, the prices of those goods would increase.
Okay.
So the imported goods will have an increase in their prices. They will now come to the levels where our domestic firms, because of the high cost of doing business, are selling. So if you bring the import price to the level that I'm selling now, then that's it. I'll sell my goods anyway. I don't have a problem with that.
Prof,
Is that what we want?
Prof, I'll come back to you on the way forward on this issue, and also the bit about what if other countries start also taking counter actions with respect to this plan to gradually place some restrictions on our exports to those countries. And I'll be coming back to the AGI chief executive, whether really maybe this is they want a soft approach, or listen, You want competition, but let the field be fair. This is PM Express Business Edition as you look at the import restriction and whether the economy is ready for it or not. We're supposed to have ended our program now, but we've given an extension 30, so we're closing at 10:30. We'll take a short break and be right back. And also when we come back as well, tomorrow is Farmers' Day. What can we do to ensure that there's sufficiency and food security as well in this country? Right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. As we look at the import restriction, and the big question we are trying to get some answers is whether the economy is ready for this or not. And also, Farmers' Day, security. We have a farmer here that Kara is an economist as well, a producer as well. And so you appreciate where he's coming from when he's very agitating on some of these issues. But also, tomorrow being Farmers' Day as well, what is the state of our food security industry? What are their concerns? What can be done? Finance and supporting the industry. I'll be getting their quick thoughts on that. But let me go quickly to Mr. Chuma Kabwa and the bit about competition. Some are saying that maybe industries are just want the easy way out. And that is why you think that, oh, that's the way to go. You know, maybe that's where the challenge is.
Not at all. In fact, industry doesn't fear competition at all.
Really?
I'm telling you.
Maybe they shouldn't be struggling in these times.
No, but if you say we don't fear competition, it doesn't mean that conditions should make us uncompetitive.
Okay.
That's a different thing. You must be very competitive. And indeed, in fact, what we are experiencing is rather unfair competition. And I'll give you the example of the cables, where the companies now, their volumes have dropped significantly because there's so much of it being imported. And we don't really believe that they are coming through the approved routes, they are paying the right duties and taxes, and the quality standards, they are meeting it. So that when that happens, it becomes unfair competition. The textile industry is even worse. That's the reason why we even fought for the zero VAT, because they were bringing the very product that our people have produced here. Within weeks, they go to other place, go and print the same kind of products, enter the market, smuggle them in, don't pay the right duties, don't pay the right taxes, they enter the market. And therefore sold at a very cheap price. Then you can't even meet the competition. So, and then bear in mind that we also have some challenges with our business environment, and we've talked extensively about it. So that is not about competition, which is dependent on the management of the company. The company owners or the businesses are efficient in their management. Of course, there are also those that are inefficient. Of course, they can't find their own space within the market. But there are a lot of them that are doing very well and are very competitive if conditions are equal. So they rather face unfair competition. And it's a very serious situation. If you take the beverages, for example, I don't know, I don't have the permission of the company.
Don't mention names. I mean,
but there's one company that we know, and it's a very popular brand. Everybody talks about it. But I can tell you, it's very popular. The local production plant only produces 30% of that. The rest, you see in the market, but they are imported. Okay? And there's another one in the milk industry. It's happening all over. There's so much excess importation of some of these products in a way that is very unfair to the local producers. And it's the reason why I believe government is trying to do some of that. And then the other thing is that immediately we are also going through serious foreign exchange challenges. You remember why the cedi was depreciating so much. It's all because we import so much more than we export. So when it happens like that, there's always pressure on your cedi. And in this short-term period, especially during this period that the IMF is here, the intervention here is that can we reduce the excesses? Because, for example, if you import sugar, we don't produce sugar, but it finds itself in this. The reason is simple. We are probably importing, and that's the statistics, we are importing much more than the local demand requires. So once you have imported, it's relatively easier to import because you don't even need the cash to import. All you need to do, get a supplier, get the bank to herbalize it. You don't transfer cash before you import. So when it gets here, once you get the bank to herbalize, you sell before you even go and pay. In the process, you are putting pressure on your cedi because you must mobilize the foreign currency to be able to go and pay. When you have this kind of cycle, local production will never be competitive. So the competitiveness is not out of contest. It's largely because the system here is so unfair and so challenging for the local producers. And that is what I believe government is trying to deal with. So if you want to deal with some of these forex matters in this short-term period, if you don't solve some of this, local capacity development is even difficult. That's why we believe that these measures are important, these measures are good, But at the same time, you work on the local capacity. But you cannot say that you want all the local capacity arrangement to be done, increase the capacity increment doesn't happen out of nothing. If you don't create market conditions to enable them to produce, to fill it, how would they increase the capacity? It's the private sector that at the end of the day is going to do this investment. If I'm going to do the investment and I do my analysis, and clearly the market conditions are such that my product is not commercially viable, why would I invest more? So then you will never build the capacity. So create conditions that give them the comfort that if I invest, I'm guaranteed. Because if there's such an unfair trading in the system, there's no guarantee on my investment. So you never build the local capacity. Government needs to help in policies. We talked about taxes, about so many things, but at the end of the day, when government is helping even in those policies, private sector has to invest. That private sector investment is very much contingent upon these other factors working and the fairness in the trade system.
For you, going forward, do you think that this thing should be put aside, or what do you think should be restructured, or for you what? Because you also are in the production as a farmer, and you're good. I mean, you've told me a lot of things in the industry. For you, going forward, what should be done? Should we put it aside? Should it be reviewed again? Or what should we do going forward?
Well, I would think that government should let us know their composite plan to stimulate production in this country. When you talk about saving foreign exchange, it's not only about import restriction that can save it. It's also about what? Domestic production to sell and make what? Foreign exchange. So one side cannot solve it. And I'm saying that if you look at what government is doing, so granted that government comes out with another policy to induce domestic production, at the same time with this, it is still not the best development approach, because the gestation period it takes for industry to be able to produce and overcome the challenges and become optimal and begin to make profit, that gestation period is very long. As compared to a gestation period, putting an LI before Parliament, it is passed, and then you give time frame, and then you implement. That gestation period is too short. So it's to say that government can find other ways to support the individual companies, like he cited some of them, industries that are capable to produce and then sell outside. I just want to say that Ghana's industry should fear competition as it stands, because you see, it is about the infant industry, stature. Once you are an infant industry, you should fear competition until you gain capacity to a point where you can now compete with the others. And that's why government's policies are supposed to protect infant industry. And most of the industries we have in Ghana are still infant industries. And that is why they need a lot of support. Only a few of them that can go global and survive. You see? And unfortunately, I'm just worried that Ghana is the headquarters of AFTA. Yeah. Ghana have got the secretariat. And if you look at our trade policies, if you look at our development policies, we will miss out the benefits that will come with AFTA.
Are you afraid that this policy measure, if it's not done well, we could see other repercussions as well, counter reactions from other countries as well? Are you worried?
Well, when it comes to international trade, there's no morality there. It has its dynamics and politics, and countries are competing. If any country thinks that, look, you have unfairly, placed restrictions on their imports, they can retaliate. And they retaliate in another form. So this could lead to a certain level of retaliation. What the WTO says is this: when there's a ban, that immediately...
A restriction here.
I'm saying when WTO, I'm talking WTO.
Okay.
When there's a ban, immediately it is sufficient grounds for another country to do what? retaliate. But when it is restriction, that every sovereign country under WTO has that leverage to place restrictions. And that's why they're using it. But then, if you say it is a restriction, and it is near a ban, then the other country also has the right to retaliate.
but a critical one tomorrow being farmers, as we try and wrap up on this.
Yeah.
And I'll bring in Prof very soon. What is the state of food security in the country? I mean, for you, what's the state of you as a farmer as well? And
Well, if you see as a farmer, and then I have enough to eat, I can just tell you that food security is okay. But that is not it.
Yeah.
You are also a consumer.
Yeah.
Food security has to do with consumption.
Yeah.
It's not about the producers.
Yeah.
And all of us know that in this country, when it comes to food security, it is very, very poor. We have a very low food security situation in this country. And that is partly because agriculture is not doing well. Look, sometimes the data that is also flowing around, which is authentic and reliable, is the Ghana Statistical Service data. If you have a country where food inflation consistently, not only months, but in years, is more than 50% of your national inflation, then you are in serious trouble. You are just in serious trouble. And that speaks volumes about your capacity to produce. And that speaks volumes about agriculture. So once you have this data, and all of us know about this data, that food inflation has consistently been more than 50% of our national inflation, not only for months, but for years, certainly the food situation in Ghana is a bad one.
What about attracting funding as well, support for the sector? Because over the years, we've seen funding drop significantly and affecting your ability to produce as well. How do we get around that challenge in terms of funding for the sector to be able to produce more whilst we look at these restrictions? Some are saying that, how are we supporting, or what should be done for the farmers in getting the required funding for your members and for you as well?
Well, you see, even where you get funding and then you go into agriculture, you can still get total loss. Yes, you can.
Maybe you're not doing certain things right.
No, you can get total loss, which will be no fault of yours. So the mere fact that you get funding should not be the reason why people should go into agriculture, should go into production. We produce for the market. We don't produce to consume ourselves because we cannot consume everything. So if you even give me funding to go into agriculture and I produce, it is not going to be the only cost that I will incur in the production. The funding is one part of the total cost. Then I produce and I don't get the market. For instance, if I'm producing and then I don't get the market and then I get my produce rotten, you have total loss. So we cannot, funding is important, but even where people have braved out of lack of funding and then to look for their individual funding to go into agriculture, they have exited because you produce and there's no market.
Interesting.
When we say, when you're a producer, you should be, look, your focus should be production. It should not be marketing. You should produce and someone will come and pick it.
Industry should come and take it. But
no, yes, whoever should come
I'll come back to you again, wrapping up on the way forward. Because let me bring in Prof in 3 minutes as I try and wrap up because time is not a good time. Prof, the way forward on this whole import restriction thing, and also as well as in the spirit of Farmers' Day as well, what do you think policy direction can be done to turn around the fortunes of farmers so that we can produce more, consume, and even export the rest?
Yeah, George, I think that I mean, you cannot roll the clock back. If that bill will pass, it will pass. But I hope that whichever committee has been set up will take its time to let whatever they do be driven by the data. It's very important that everything is driven by data. Before they restrict any type of product, they should have a meeting with the domestic producers, find out how much they can produce now, and have a plan of what government can do for them so that they can increase their capacity, and then make sure that the shortfall is what we import. And we should be careful that it doesn't cause inflation. Because inflation itself would also mean that the firms themselves will come back with a higher cost of production. It's very important that we take a look at that. That is one. Two, it is also important that we recognize the crucial role we play in the after. It's very important. And the reason why is that optics will not look good for us as the hosts if we begin to even impose restrictions on certain products that might come from other African countries. I always say that for rushing to host the AfCFTA, there is a big opportunity on Ghana to take the lead in moving all restrictions to trade insofar as Sub-Saharan Africa is concerned. So this is something that we need to navigate very properly. Yes, per the WTO, we can restrict for balance of payment problems. If we have balance of payment problems because our reserves are drying up, we can restrict. I remember in October last year, the Bank of Ghana came up with some sort of forex restrictions to restrict import. That is allowed under the WTO. It's also allowed under environmental concerns for it to restrict and for national security. So as for import restrictions, you can go about it. Now, the third point I need to make is about the whole structure for the implementation of the restrictions. I think that if we leave it in the hands of politicians, it will turn into something that we've experienced in the past. I rather think that we should rather try as much as possible to use the restriction of forex for those imports, rather than for a committee to sit down and come up with quotas for the importation of those goods. That itself lends itself to a lot of corruption. Because if I'm an importer and I need the permit to import, I'll be prepared to sacrifice whatever potential profit that I can gain.
But Prof, sorry for that.
People even get a license and sell the license. Yes.
And sorry, Prof, in a minute as well, the bit about the agri sector, as I try and wrap up with you, what do you think should be done going forward?
Yes, and about the agri sector, I think that
in a minute,
the government has some kind of efforts that is doing with regards to agri. If we look at agri contribution to GDP, it is increasing, so it's good. Maybe the planning for food and jobs, we need to upscale it. We need to put in more support and also to encourage the aftermarket, after production chain of agricultural produce. That is very important. The farmer should be supported after the factory gate to get his good to the market. And if food inflation is high, it is because of that additional cost that is incurred from the farm gate to the market where we go and buy. So the support that should go to agriculture should also be extended to the marketing of agricultural products. And I think that if we do that well, it will bring down food prices. Okay,
thank you. But Mr. Sesuma, let me come back to you. Way forward as you try and wrap up on this whole, is it limited restriction or gradual restriction? The way forward, also farmers.
Some people don't want it, but we believe in the gradualist approach. And I think we should be concerned about the balance of payment situation and the effect of on our inflation, because remember the Statistical Service data released in recent times talking about imported inflation, because we import so much. So when the cedi depreciates and there's so much hikes in prices over there, it affects our inflation levels. And therefore, is a reason for trying to make some effort to stabilize all these. In the process, measures of this nature are being introduced, but I agree that the local capacity has to be built. These measures can only be temporary. I don't also believe that this can be there forever. It's only a temporary measure. That's why it's acceptable under the WTO arrangement that you can do some import restrictions for a temporary measure. And if you consider it as a temporary measure, then we must quickly move into develop local capacity. In terms of AfCFTA, I think if you look at the trade vulnerability report by Statistical Service, they said 47% of our imports come from one country. That's how vulnerable we are. So, and it's not in Africa. So a lot of our imports are not even coming from Africa. And therefore, a countervailing measure from Africa may not be immediately there. But after we need to build our capacity to be able to export. Otherwise, and these measures are supposed to help us build our capacity. We need to quickly work on it, increase capacity so that we can actually compete in NAFTA, because they are not the ones that we are competing with in this instance. Concerning the agric issue, I think that industry can be a major off-taker for agricultural produce. If we develop the value chains,
Dr.
yes, if we develop the value chains very well. But industry can only take it when we become efficient. The reason why import substitution hasn't worked so well in Ghana is because the imported products, the manufactured products, a lot of it, we import the raw materials. So you bring the cost back, you only do marginal addition. You don't make that much value. If the value addition is not so high, you don't get the full gain. And therefore, if you have a Greek sector that is doing very well, industry can be a big off-taker. Thank you.
Final words, a minute as we wrap up. Way forward, Mr. Karowe.
For agriculture or for what?
Everything wrap up in a minute or something.
Well, Ghana has to rethink our development strategy. We know that government is making effort by this LI to restrict imports. We say, well, they say we are not opposed to it, but then it must be done taking cognizance of our current situation, and also it must be done also supporting domestic producers' capacity to grow. When it comes to the agricultural sector, that is the future of this country, because every industry depends on this. Food is very critical. And I'm saying that if you look at what is happening in agriculture today, government must work tirelessly to increase irrigation agriculture.
30 seconds,
also to ensure that farmers get facilities, road network is good, and then also market for their produce.
Well, I know the debate will still go on in your homes about this whole import restrictions. And also, I'd like to use the opportunity to say ayiko to our hard-working farmers out there, including Dr. Karowe. I'll call him Dr. Karowe. Doing great job out there. And all the farmers will say ayiko, and congratulations for those good work you're doing. Now we celebrate you. We appreciate you so much, and we know that the future will definitely be bright. My name is George Jaffet. I've been your host. Together here, I engage the Chief Executive Association of Ghana Industries. I'll call him Dr. Karowe, General Secretary of General Agricultural Workers Union, a farmer, an economist, and also Prof. Ebo Texan. He is an economist. The debate will go on in your homes, in your workplace. And I say, ayiko to the farmers out there. Have a great day.